Friends, a very good morning to you and welcome to this service of worship from Nottage General Baptist and Unitarian Chapel for Sunday the 4th of October 2020. And we begin our words for this time when things are not okay with some words adapted from, I should say, Molly Brewer. Friends, I cannot pretend, and so I will not tell you that everything is okay, that there is no reason to be angry, that you must be optimistic or at peace. I cannot pretend these things, and so I won't tell them to you. All I ask is that we remember there is love. A love that is holding us together. And let us rest in this love. Amen. Now, the reading I have chosen for today's service is one that I'm pretty sure I have never used in my near on 20 years of leading worship. Perhaps when I read it, you'll understand why. It's from the Hebrew scriptures, from what we would normally call the Old Testament, and it's from the book of Numbers. This is the route the Israelites followed as they marched out of Egypt under the leadership of Moses and Aaron. At the Lord's direction, Moses kept a written record of their progress. These are the stages of their march, identified by the different places where they stopped along the way. They set out from the city of Ramesses in early spring, on the 15th day of the first month, on the morning after the first Passover celebration. The people of Israel left defiantly in full view of all the Egyptians. After leaving Ramesses, the Israelites set up camp at Succoth. Then they left Succoth and camped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness. They left Etham and turned back towards Pihahiroth, opposite Baal Zephon, and camped near Migdol. They left Pihahiroth and crossed the Red Sea into the wilderness beyond. Then they travelled for 3 days into the Etham wilderness and camped at Marah. They left Marah and camped at Elim, where there were, 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees. They left Elim and camped beside the Red Sea. They left the Red Sea and camped in the wilderness at Sin. They then left the wilderness of Sin and camped at Dophkah. They left Dophkah and camped at Alush. They left Alush and camped at Rephidim, where there was no water for the people to drink. They left Rephidim and camped in the wilderness of Sinai. They left the wilderness of Sinai and camped at Kibroth Hattava. They left Kibroth Hattava and camped at Hazeroth. They left Hazeroth and camped at Rithmah. They left Rithmah and camped at Rimmon Perez. They left Rimmon Perez and camped at Libnah. They left Libnah and camped at Rissah. They left Rissah and camped at Kehelatha. They left Kehelatha and camped at Mount Shepher. They left Mount Shepher and camped at Harada. They left Harada and camped at Makheloth. They left Makheloth and camped at Tahath. They left Tahath and camped at Terah. They left Terah and camped at Mithkah. They left Mithkah and camped at Hashmonah. They left Hashmonah and camped at Moseroth. They left Moseroth and camped at Bene-Jaakan. They left Bene-Jaakan and camped at Hor-Haggidgad. They left Hor-Haggidgad and camped at Jotbathah. They left Jotbathah and camped at Abronah. They left Abronah and camped at Ezion-Geber. They left Ezion-Geber and camped at Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin. They left Kadesh and camped at Mount Hor, at the border of Edom. While they were at the foot of Mount Hor, Aaron the priest was directed by the Lord to go up the mountain, and there he died. This happened in midsummer, on the first day of the 5th month of the 40th year after Israel's departure from Egypt. Aaron was 123 years old when he died there on Mount Hor. At that time, the Canaanite king of Arad, who lived in the Negev in the land of Canaan, heard that the people of Israel were approaching his land. Meanwhile, the Israelites left Mount Hor and camped at Zalmonah. Then they left Zalmonah and camped at Punon. They left Punon and camped at Oboth. They left Oboth and camped at Abraham on the border of Moab. They left Abarim and camped at Dibon Gad. They left Dibon Gad and camped at Almon Diblathaim. They left Almon Diblathaim, and camped in the mountains east of the river near Mount Nebo. They left the mountains east of the river and camped on the plains of Moab beside the Jordan River across from Jericho. Along the Jordan River, they camped from Beth Jeshimoth as far as the meadows of Acacia on the plains of Moab. And that, you may be pleased to hear, ends our reading from the book of Numbers. My apologies to anybody who speaks Hebrew for my mutilation of the language, and perhaps you can now see why I've not preached from that particular text before now. Would you please now join me in a period of prayer? Loving God, source of life and creativity, in a universe so vast, may we sustain a good sense of this presentness and a good sense of worth in ourselves. When time and events and people go by so fast, may we know the power in pausing, and in pausing find our life renewed. At this time and in this sacred hour, we remember our own localities. We remember the town of Porthcawl with its beaches and its marvellous ecology, its peoples, both lifelong residents and those who have come in more recent times. In our day-to-day living, beyond this time of celebration, may we be surrounded with a good spirit of life and vitality, of healing and restoration, of acceptance and quietness of mind. May we be part of a good spirit in the world where life and vitality overcomes the powers of destructiveness and blandness. May today be the day that we as Christians, Muslims, Jews, and all others become sojourners together on the pathways of goodwill, service, compassion and justice. And may our living be enlarged by the ageless truths found within all traditions and within all peoples. Let us now spend some time in quiet, reflective prayer, bringing before God all our joys and concerns this day. In returning from the silence, I invite you to join me in saying out loud the prayer of Jesus. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Well, in these very strange times where we're not yet allowed to sing in public, we will now enjoy a hymn sung for us by members of the Unitarian Musical Society. I hope you enjoyed that hymn. I know I certainly did. Well, this particular Sunday, which is Sunday the 4th of October 2020, we find ourselves in the middle of the Jewish holiday of Sukkot. Sukkot is a festival and a holiday which has its origins both in the agricultural year and also in the story of the history of the Jewish people. In ancient times, the people of what is now Israel and Palestine used to build booths in their distant fields in order to make collecting the harvest much easier. But these booths had a dual purpose, as they also recalled the story of the Jewish people's wanderings through the desert, from being freed from slavery in Egypt to the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. For our Jewish brothers and sisters, this is a time of travel between Passover and Shavuot. Therefore, for Jewish people, Sukkot marks not a destination, but a journey. So what can we, as a people who share some of the same religious texts, but not the common history, learn from this Jewish holiday? Well, unlike most holidays which are about the getting there or about the getting out of there, rather than the travelling there, Sukkot is a holiday and a holy day that marks a journey rather than the arrival at the intended destination. So the message that we can take from Sukkot is that we are always journeying. We are never completely there. If you think you have arrived, then your goals are far too small. Ultimately, what we can take from this Jewish holy day is that just as the Hebrews went through stages in their journeying, so also a person of faith goes through stages in their spiritual journey through life. Therefore, I want us to think about the life of faith as being a journey. In our reading today, we heard a long list of places where the Hebrews journeyed to and from during their 40 years of wandering in the desert. In fact, we heard 42 times they left such and such a place and camped at such and such a place. So what can we learn from a chapter that is full of places that are totally alien to us? Well, the story can be seen as a metaphor for our own journeying in the wilderness of this world. These journeys come in stages. So let me share with you what I believe some of these stages are. The first stage of spiritual growth is what I call spiritual awakening. Just as in Israel's first stage of spiritual growth, just as it was the initial deliverance and victory from slavery, so it is with our own first stage of spiritual growth. At some point during this stage, we wake up to the reality of the divine presence in our lives. This happens not because we are necessarily seeking after God, but because God is seeking after us. The second stage is what I like to term believing and belonging. This is where someone who has accepted their fledgling spiritual growth decides to connect with a community, perhaps by stepping through the doors of a congregation such as Nottage Chapel for the very first time, often the first time since childhood. And they begin to grow in faith, in fellowship with other people of faith. The third stage is service and leadership. When you first accept the way of life of a person of faith, it's as if you have risen from a long night's sleep and your spirit has been born anew. As part of this process, many people grow into positions of service and leadership in their chosen community and become involved in such areas as service on committees or becoming an officer of the congregation. Very needed and worthy roles. Some people may volunteer as Sunday school teachers. Others train for the ministry themselves. Unfortunately, though, this is where many people stop, often because it seems like a natural stopping place. You reach this point in your spiritual growth and you stay there, sometimes for many, many years. And then, often, people retire from service and leadership to let the next generation take over. However, the biggest lesson from this third stage of spiritual development is the discovery that God is always with us, even during the mundane routine of life, which, to be honest, is the vast majority of life. The second stage of our spiritual growth might be called a second awakening and a deeper walk. Few people who get to stage 3 ever ask the question, is there something more to my faith? Is there something more to my journey with God? But it is a question that we all need to ask ourselves from time to time. As the Apostle Paul so eloquently put it in his letter to the Philippians, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it. But one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining to what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward. The fifth, and possibly the final stage of spiritual growth, is what I call a glimpse of the promised land. Every now and then we are fortunate enough to get a peek of what is ahead of us. And like the Apostle Paul again, we can say, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Of course, some of us may be on the home stretch of our spiritual wandering through this world. So, you thought that there was nothing that you could learn from, of any importance anyway, from this chapter of the 33rd chapter of the book of Numbers. But the reason for this sermon is that I want to encourage you, encourage us all, to a deeper spiritual journey, far more in depth than what I could cover in this sermon. There is, as you might expect, no easy path on the spiritual journey towards spiritual maturity. The soul that seeks a deeper level of maturity must be prepared for a long, arduous task. But for me, this is the message and the power of the Jewish holiday of Sukkot. If we are to find true spiritual growth, we must forsake anything that promises instant spiritual gratification. Thank you for listening, and Amen. Well, some good news for you in our announcements. After a lot of work by the officers of the congregation to make sure that we can reopen safely, and despite the setback of various parts of Wales going into local lockdown, the decision has been made that Nottage Chapel can reopen for face-to-face worship on a limited basis from next Sunday, which is Sunday, October the 11th. We are limited to the number of people we can welcome to our services, and strict social distancing will be in force, and track and trace. So anybody attending will have to give their contact details, their address and telephone number, such like, which we will keep safe according to data protection. There will be hand sanitizers available and strict measures to keep people apart. We will also not be able to sing, which I know from people who've heard my voice will be pretty glad. But there will be recorded music used during the service. So you won't be just hearing me droning on for ever and ever. So if you would like to attend, if you live in the area, I think we currently have about a dozen people or so, maybe 15 people who have committed to attending so far. Others, for health reasons and such like, have decided to leave it there for the moment. But if anybody watching this video living in the Bridgend County Borough area would like to attend, then please do contact me either via the Facebook page, Twitter, or my email address, which is nottage.minister@gmail.com. And if we can welcome you, and we would be delighted to, then we will let you know. So thank you very much. That's some news that I've been waiting for the last 7 months. Well, thank you for joining us in this video worship today. And we bring our service to a close with these words of benediction. May the broad expanse of God's love shape your perspective on your own life and on your own needs, including those things that disappoint you. May the eyes of your heart be open to all the blessings that surround you. And may this awareness produce a harvest of generosity in your spirit. May thankfulness rise up within you, not just this day, but day after day, from the early morning watch until you retire for the night. May your prayers reflect gratitude, while also acknowledging the needs of others whose situations are so drastically different. And may the grace, peace, and love of God protect, defend, and empower you. Amen.